Yes, and we do hear a lot about that term moral injury, and I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more on that, in terms of your perspective and how this COVID pandemic is, playing into this whole moral injury concept. So could you elaborate a little bit more about that and what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's medicine is such an odd career. I don't know how many of your listeners are actually like maybe not in healthcare, sort of maybe healthcare curious about what it might be like. But it's becoming a physician is a very sort of unique cultural experience. So I now teach first year medical students. So they've only been in school for like a couple of months now. And I find it quite refreshing. It's a great group of men and women, but it reminds me that there are things that you learn from like your first day of medical school, where it's like this idea that we can diagnose, we can treat, we can fix people, right? And that's embedded not just in becoming a physician, that's sort of embedded in this cultural idea that we have in America, where it's like there's a pill for everything, or like there's a, we're very much, it's sort of like fixing stuff like that, like a magic bullet. And I think you sort of become indoctrinated in that idea, and then you get to something like the COVID pandemic where you don't know. And then all of a sudden you're like, I can't treat, like I can't fix, I can't do the thing that has become intrinsic to my, I've sort of adopted this professional identity of what it means to be a physician, and I can't do this. I think that contributes to a lot of this idea of moral injury, where like you're either not able to do the thing that you know is right, or you are actively contributing to something that you are concerned might be wrong. And I think that this idea of what it is to be a doctor has sort of played into the pandemic with all of its unknowns and uncertainties. I do think in some ways it was good that we had sort of become accustomed to this term before the pandemic. I mean, I think one of the reasons people really embraced it was that this idea of burnout really kind of, in some ways, put the onus, it sort of made people think like, oh, it's the individual's problem, versus moral injury, where it was this idea that you are a player in a larger context. And so it's not just like, oh, you need to fix your burnout. So I think in some ways that was good, and it was a better way to think about it, and certainly is much more applicable to what was happening before we had any treatments and before we really had any idea what was going on.
Do you feel like people are still experiencing moral injury now that we do have treatments and vaccines and things like that?
It's obviously different for different people. I would think that we are probably moving into like a slightly different emotional stage collectively in the healthcare force. I mean, I think the challenges are different now. So it's less sort of medical uncertainty. The PPE supply chain has come forward. Like, again, we have tests available. We have like monoclonal antibodies. We have an oral treatment now, right? We have some of that stuff that hopefully is effective. We have vaccines, but I think now some of those more, I guess, traditional burnout factors are coming to the force, where burnout, I like to think about burnout as a mismatch between supply and demand. This idea that we don't have enough resources, whatever resources, time, energy, staffing, mechanical equipment, like whatever, to do the job that to do a good job, to do the job that we really want to do. And that creates burnout. And I think now, sort of 2+ years into it, we're shifting back to that more traditional systems-based problem with healthcare systems burnout.
For us, by us, and just for us, this is Hope for Med.